Hi, and welcome to the Unreal Engine News and Community Spotlight. Amid Evil, a retro FPS inspired by titles such as Doom, Quake, Heretic, and others, recently released its 5th episode to an overwhelmingly positive fan base. Taking directions from their fans, Amid Evil has enjoyed great success in early access and wears its inspiration on its pixelated sleeve, but that doesn't mean it lacks modern mechanics that make today's games great. Our team caught up with Simon Rance and Leon Zawada from Indefatigable to discuss their game, their journey to indie development, and their experience with UE4. Stock up and reload as we talk modern-day retro shooters in the interview linked below. Beatboxers, a fighting and rhythm game hybrid, took home first place at E3's highly prestigious college game competition this last summer. The team of students shared the tale of their development process, design decisions, and even some how-to tips they utilized to keep beatboxers moving and performant. Check out their story, detailed below. We're excited to announce Visual Disruptors, Exploring the Future of Virtual Production, a new series of exclusive podcasts, video interviews, and articles exploring how virtual production is ushering in a new era of filmmaking, all through the eyes of top creative teams already using these powerful techniques in their production pipelines. The first video is already available. If you're curious to learn more about how virtual production is changing the way studios approach the craft of film, video, and broadcasting, you'll find a ton of insightful content at our new virtual production hub, which we've linked below. With the release of 421 just around the corner, we are pushing out preview builds. Preview 3 came out earlier this week with over 150 fixes and updates. If you're feeling adventurous, we'd love for you to download the preview, test it out, and shoot us some incredibly valuable feedback. Do keep in mind that the preview builds are still under heavy active development and not intended for production. And there's still time to get ready for the 2018 Epic MegaJam. The jam kicks off on November 8th, running for 7 days. It'll be a ton of fun, and it's a fantastic opportunity to try out new features in Engine and put your skills to the test. And you could win some amazing prizes. Not only do we have sweet raffles from Intel and Falcon Northwest, jelly of the person taking home a frag box, Logitech Gaming, Quixel, Side Effects, Game Textures, and marketplace sponsors Dokio and Game DNA are offering incredible prizes for our jammers, so get ready to jam today. Now, for our weekly karma earners, these lovely folks are supporting their fellow devs, hopping in and answering questions on Answer Hub. So many thanks to Every Nun, Steve Cyberson, Ali Akbar, Thompson N13, Shadow River, T. Sumisaki, Angelmana, Mighty Enigma, Ninjin, and Yuki Ogino. Thank you so much for being rock stars. Our first community spotlight this week is Squeezy Cube. Now available on iOS and Android, Squeezy Cube originated as a spring UE4 jam, and the team has continued their development, so you can squeeze, squash, dodge, and jump your way through different levels daily, and collect your gang of squeezies and customize them with stylish hats in this hyper-casual arcade runner. Our second spotlight, Don't Bite Devs, is in the midst of development on Wreckin Ball Adventure. It's a platformer coming to PC and Switch, in which the protagonist, a little robot named K160, managed to escape a fatal fate, and now he needs to find a way out from the mysterious lab. Why does evil Supercom want to destroy him and others of his kind? You have to find out for yourself. And our final spotlight this week is a project called The Faceless Ones. Ignacio, a solo dev from Argentina, is building this title about a female Aztec warrior mother who's working to rescue her son. You'll have to pass through arena battles and fight against fallen Aztec warriors to prove her vigor and bravery before the gods. He'd love some feedback, so hop over to the forums and let him know what you think. Thanks for joining us for our news and community spotlight. Hi, and welcome to our Unreal Engine livestream. I'm your host, Amanda Bott. We have Jacek Materna from CTO of Assembla. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And Tim Slager, fellow community manager. So, you want to give them a brief overview of what you'll be discussing today?
Absolutely. So Today we're going to be talking about building better games with the right tools. So one of the common themes in a lot of game studios I talked to, I was just over at Games Forum in Seattle earlier this week, is more and more companies are looking to adopt tools to help them deliver better games faster, meet tighter timelines. So we'll walk through some of that and then kind of dive into some specifics around, how somebody can get started, what things to check out, a couple of things to pay attention to. If you're starting a studio or thinking about joining a studio, or maybe you're already part of a larger studio.
Perfect. And it's definitely a very important part of game development at large. And then for folks, yeah, Assembla has long sponsored our game jams, and I'm sure you've saved more than just a little bit of heartache and pain by supporting our jammers through that experience. So we're definitely grateful to have you.
We've always been, absolutely. It's always been an exciting event. We really like what you guys are doing. I think it's a great community-driven effort. So we're more than happy to help out.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, before we dive in, we are excited for another key giveaway. So Light Bearers, which you may remember from last year's Epic MegaJam, has continued their development, and they just released a couple days ago.
So awesome.
And we're super pumped for them.
Oh god, that's awesome. That's so
and
great.
It's very appropriately Halloween themed. So we're gonna play their trailer real quick, and you'll have to keep an eye out during the stream for keys.
Oh no! He saw me!
So we're super excited for that team. Do
Awesome.
keep an eye out as we drop some keys in. But if you'd like to go ahead and get started, Jacek?
Absolutely. So a little bit of background, myself, Amanda already introduced me. So I'm the CTO over at Assembla. I work with a lot of our studios, basically helping them figure out what the right solutions are, what the right tools are going to be for the job at hand. And, we've accumulated over 400 studios here at Assembla, so we've got quite a wide spectrum of small, medium, even some pretty large studios running all types of different tools. So a little bit of background on myself. And where I'd like to start is, talking a little bit about what's happening out there in the ecosystem in terms of studios, before diving into the specifics. And really, it centers around, modern 3D engines, whether you're using Epic's engine or some other engines, these technologies have really pushed the envelope of allowing teams to do quite a bit of work in collaboration and just execute on some creative strategies. And next to the people in a studio or on your team, everybody says the same thing, which is, the source code, the assets, the art, the blueprints, those are the most valuable assets after the folks. And so where those assets are stored, how they're collaborated on, becomes really the center story. And it's an important piece because, like I said, there's multiple things that you need to do to build a game, ship a game. But at the center of it is this concept of source code. At the same time, studios are under a lot of pressure to deliver more with less. Games are getting bigger. It's becoming more competitive. So there's this huge push to try to get more done with less. And that's where really you're starting to see studios integrating more and more tools, more and more technology to help them get the job done. And the tools that are very popular today are really centered around the cloud. So cloud being, applications that you can get really quickly, you can get spun up really quickly. You don't need a whole lot of expertise to get those done. So that's really kind of a trend that's been happening for quite a while, but it's become kind of center in terms of game development because most software companies up in this point have always relied on the cloud. And I think you're starting to see more and more of that with studios because these games are now running in the cloud, multiplayer. You talk about the success of Fortnite and just this concept of live operations. So once a game is shipped, it's iteratively improved upon. It's not kind of a one and done deal. So it's really, games are now really leveraging a lot of these tools. And at the end of the day, it's because with all that work and all the deadlines that need to happen, studios want to stay focused on their games. They want to stay focused on the creative process, the experience, making sure their players are getting what they need. And the last thing they want to do is focus or really become experts in these IT tools at the end of the day. And so that's why, there's an ecosystem of companies that are delivering these applications to studios so that they can kind of stay on target and focus all of their power on the actual games themselves. And that really speaks to the fact that you've got a lot of studios that may have just a few folks, but they're able to do quite a bit. If you compare that to say 10 years ago, smaller, they're able to ship games rather quickly and build pretty advanced experiences, whereas you may have needed a huge kind of team before, with IT expertise and all these other things. So it's really kind of an exciting time to be in the gaming development space. So just, at a really high level for folks that may not be, in a studio or kind of actively in the development process, here's a really simplistic view of a studio from kind of, the fact that you got these artists, concept artists on the left, all the way through animation, development, the folks writing the code, maybe the blueprints. And then you've got obviously the downstream gaming community. You could be working with publishers, maybe you're self-publishing, but all of these play a part in building, deploying, and kind of maintaining games. And what's really what's bridging all of those components together, all those pieces, is some of these tools I mentioned before. Starting with source code management, so that critical collaboration piece where you can have artists maybe in the same studio, or maybe your studio is leveraging a third-party partner, what's called external development studios. So maybe you're having another team do art for you and you're focusing on the core mechanics. Regardless of what it is, the source code management tooling is super important to get the collaboration in place, to store these important art assets, the binary assets. And then, in today's world, a lot of games are now operating in what's called kind of this live ops model, where there's going to be constantly new versions being built, distributed, and then in a lot of cases hosted in services, say, such as AWS, where you've got a huge multiplayer platform as part of it. And all of these pieces, like I said, are underpinned by the version control or source code management technologies. And, they are not easy to manage yourself. A lot of them are fairly complicated. You always got to deal with maintenance and kind of packaging, and security is a big one as well. So, I put a box around it calling the team distraction. So a lot of teams say the same thing over and over, which is, we want to focus on our games. We want to build the experiences. We want to get the ability to constantly deploy our software to the cloud, to have new versions for our multiplayer components. And we want to have the artists and the animators and developers collaborate, but we want to really manage that. So it's again speaking back to that focusing on your games piece, where looking to that ecosystem of applications that can help your team do these things is really what the center of the conversation is about.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to finding a partner or partners in this ecosystem that could scale with you. So like I said, maybe you're starting off, maybe you're just thinking about building a game, or maybe you've already got a studio set up and you're looking at the next project. Partnership is a key word. I think more so than any other vertical industry, the gaming community is pretty tight knit. So when a studio needs to build a game, it could take a year, 2, 3, 4. It's important to find companies or teams that you can trust and partner with, because they're going to be working with you pretty closely. And so the key word here being partners. So there's a lot of great companies that build products, and you can download them and just kind of go on your own. But I think it's also really important to look at companies that have a partnership focus around helping you kind of grow and helping you kind of navigate a lot of these challenges that I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because, again, back to the core of creative teams and what game studios are all about, these technologies are fairly complicated to set up, fairly complicated to kind of use well or use 100%. So there's not really a lot of expertise or tribal knowledge that exists in these studios around how to kind of optimize this, how to get more done with less. So back to that partnership, it's important to get partners that can help you navigate that. What's the best practice? If we're shipping an RPG or an MMO or some kind of live ops kind of cloud-based game, how can we get everything set up so it's going to be optimized, so we don't have to do anything ourselves, but we also don't want to pay too much. So again, having that expertise is something else to look out for when you're partnering or finding these ecosystem partners. So what would a team look for? And there's really 3 areas if you're kind of taking notes about what to go out into the ecosystem and kind of ask questions about. And first and foremost is scalability and performance. So it's important that whatever you're going to be bringing in to help you with these tasks, it's got to be on all the time, and it's got to be performant. Gaming produces big assets, big files. They're not just text files with source code. So being able to leverage a solution that is highly performant, but also scalable is super important. I've talked to a lot of studios, and maybe 5 people, and they're actually working with different partners in different parts of the world that are helping them on certain pieces of the game. So how do you get everybody to communicate together is also a piece of that scalability. So it's again, probably the number one thing to look for is, can the solution perform for the assets I'm building, and can my team kind of grow when they're probably in different parts of the world? So not everybody may be in the same physical location.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, especially when we have our game jams, where you have people that are all over the world that are working together and they're participating in you have one guy, an artist in maybe Argentina and a programmer in Australia, and they need to be able to collaborate and work together and be able to make sure that they're sharing the tools and sharing the resources, and nobody's working on out-of-date code. So it's super important, and I think super critical for all things game development.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And likewise, kind of a hot number 2 would be backups. When you produce a game and you create or put a lot of time into the actual assets and everything, you want to make sure that the information is backed up and available in case something goes wrong. More often than not, if you're running your own system, it's really difficult to ensure that backups are working correctly. And at the same time, having the ability to make sure that you've got all the versions of your work as projects come and go. So you may have a new project that spins up, and you want to make sure that it leverages maybe previous work. So ensuring that you have all of that history in kind of a lockbox is also super important. And there's different ways to do it, but it's again a critical piece, especially as you get closer to the publishers or shipping the game. They're going to demand that as well. They want to have particular guarantees that the assets and the code and everything is in kind of a safe place in case something happens, or they want to go look at something or make new versions from that. And then as you spoke before, I call it ditch the VPN. Game development is collaborative, and everybody's working on a particular game. Excuse me. They're in different parts of the world, and it's important that it's easy for people to join up, contribute, and then go on with potentially another task. So collaboration is paramount. And today what you're seeing is that people are moving away from what I call VPNs, which is kind of a secure way to connect people over the internet to maybe these tools to kind of more modern cloud-based security approaches where everyone can just kind of hop in. If you're going to be on the UE4 Jam, you'll be using Assembla. You just sign in, you get your username. You can suddenly grab all the latest code and collaborate. So it just makes it easy. So you kind of eliminate that complicated piece of, hey, we got to add a new team member. Where are they? We got to kind of do all this kind of configuration in the background. So making that easy, I think, is critical as well, because teams will grow, they'll shrink, and you want to have that flexibility.
Right. It also adds a layer of accountability and quality control, because now you're able to see who's contributing what and who's doing what, and if something does go awry, we want to figure out where the problem happens and try and get to the solution, and obviously not make whatever, but that way if something does go awry, we could always back up or restore, or at least figure out where those problems came in.
Yep. Exactly. And, kind of circling back a little bit, through and through, we've talked about the concepts like history, collaboration, who's working on what, who changed what. At the core of that is what's called version control. So, the predominant technologies for version control are these three. There's a few others, but I think these are the main ones that folks may be familiar with, or developers. In the center is Perforce. Perforce has been doing version control for gaming for a really, really long time. And they've provided and built a really excellent ecosystem of tools, integrations with the engines, performance, scalability. So that they're kind of the gold standard for version control. And there are others like Subversion, Git LFS that still work really well. Maybe it's a smaller project, maybe it's a personal project. They have a role to play, but when it comes to building on a platform and kind of scaling up to ship a game, you want to pick the technology that's going to scale with you. And today, with the state of the technology out there, Perforce is still the leader. I think Git and Git LFS, they've been making some real awesome strides in the last couple of years. Microsoft just bought GitHub, so they're going to be critical players in that ecosystem. But I haven't talked to many studios that successfully have deployed it in a scalable way. There's still some challenges with how these technologies approach big files and just kind of transfers. So again, if you can get Perforce and you can get it kind of in a scalable way, it's still the way to go. It's obviously going to be not as cheap in most cases as, say, a Subversion or Git LFS, but then it all depends on what do you're going to be paying for something somewhere. And so again, these are the three to kind of check out. And there's different ecosystem providers that provide these capabilities. Like Assembla, we've got all three, so you can actually just pick which one you like. Some are just Git, some are just Subversion and stuff like that.
Someone actually had a question going back to VPNs. If you feel that VPNs don't provide the necessary security for global game development, what do you feel like cloud platforms offer in terms of easy collaboration and asset maintenance that they don't?
Yeah, I think, first of all, VPNs are secure. They use secure technology to encrypt your data and all that kind of stuff. But it's really more on the IT and administrative side. So with the cloud and the ability to use, kind of HTTPS or TLS, which is kind of the same secure stuff that's going over a VPN tunnel. Mm-hmm. So the security aspect is there. It's just a matter of the infrastructure and the IT. Typically, when you're doing VPNs, you have to have some configuration somewhere on some kind of piece of equipment, whether it's virtual or not, where you have to kind of register all the users, where they're going to go, the different IPs, share certificates. So there's kind of the onboarding process, the UI is less ideal than just saying, hey, just send an invite to my email address. I'll just sign up with the service, put my credentials in, and they could be super secure around two-factor authentication, etc. And suddenly you're able to access, let's say, Perforce or Subversion just by using a URL and something like your username and password, or it could be something as advanced as Google Authenticator and stuff like that. So it's really less about the security side of it, because they're both secure, can be secure, and it's more about just the ease of getting new people to kind of join a team.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
You bet. So then, moving along to some what I call studio lessons learned. These are, there's a couple of themes that we see over and over, especially with new studios. And I thought I'd share those because I think some of them are interesting around topics that aren't typically discussed, or stuff to look out for as you're getting to that stage, or maybe you're even looking at your own studio today and seeing how can we get better. And the first one is the 3D engine does not solve everything, meaning, these 3D engines now, like, the Epic engine's got so many capabilities, so many plugins, it really integrates with many, many things, including version control, including your art tools. And people are extending these engines in really awesome ways. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of behind the scenes that still has to happen to make, version control work, your builds work, shipping software to cloud services. A lot of that stuff isn't native to the engine, and nor should it really be. And that's just kind of one theme to kind of pay attention to, is that you got to pick the engine that you want to solve your task, that's going to be the best for your game. It's got the best community support, but you also want to think about, again, the things behind the scenes, like version control, the cloud providers, things even like project management. How are we going to coordinate the schedules about how to ship this game, when to ship it, how to test it? So again, just thinking that I've heard a lot of folks that just say, hey, I just get the engine, I'm ready to go. I've got a team in the engine, and we've got some art tools, and we go. And I think the theme here, or the story, is to say that's absolutely critical, but also think about where you're going to store the files, how they're going to be stored, what is this going to look like when we deploy it or ship it, and also how are we going to track just building the game. So we'll talk a little bit later about project management, or how to kind of control timelines. What are we going to ship when? And so again, it's just kind of a theme that I wanted to reaffirm, that it's important to consider early in the project, if not right before it. The second one is, and I've got this pretty complex picture here. I'd say, gaming, unlike software, I've been in the software space for a really long time. It's extremely complicated, more so than most projects, because you've got this creative element, VFX element, got a lot of technical elements, and they're all happening potentially in parallel, in sequence. They're kind of, interdependent. So collaboration is really important. So having the ability to track all this, collaborate, making sure everybody is working together, so that you don't get into a scenario where you've got people are waiting on a team or something like that. So again, the theme here is that because of the complexity, there's a lot of different tasks that have to happen. And some tasks are dependent on each other. Having something or creating a process where you can control that and collaborate on the different steps becomes really, really important. And I think it separates the really effective teams from the teams that have to, they get into these situations where they may not have realized that there's still a number of things that need to happen. So speaking to kind of the planning piece about here's what's going to happen, here's how we're going to build out the different pieces of the pipeline. If you could do that in a collaborative way, so you can have everybody kind of working together in one kind of view, it becomes really efficient for even a small team. And then the other one is, thinking about team buy-in and art. We are talking a lot about developer tools right now, some technical kind of dev-centric stuff. What I found is typically the art teams, the concept art teams, historically have been kind of in their own silos. A lot of studios are still organized like that. You got technical directors, creative directors, and all that makes sense from an organizational perspective. But when it comes to this pipeline, you're going to have developers that want to collaborate with the art teams, concept artists. Maybe your art team is not even part of your studio. Maybe there's a partner you're working with. So it's important when you pick the tools that everybody buys in. So it's not just that the developers or the technical team says, hey, here's what we're going to use, and everybody has to go just subscribe to it. Being able to have a conversation with the creative team and say, hey, here's how it's going to work. What do you guys think? Can we optimize it? So how do we get everybody to participate? Really become successful. So if you can get the whole team to buy in, then you're basically going to have a much more effective use of the tools, versus some studios where you just have all these tools packed into the development team, and then the art team does what they want, and then when they want to collaborate, it kind of breaks down into kind of classic, yeah, we'll just email you everything, we'll put in a Dropbox, et cetera, et cetera. So if you could break some of those silos down, you get even more efficiency across this entire process. Branching or locking, this is again a development focused topic. However, what's important really, other than getting into the specifics of what a branch is or what locking is at the center of this is collaboration. So collaboration is critical so that when you have somebody working on a character, they don't want to be spending 6 hours on a character when somebody else is editing some piece of that character and they find out that they've been working on the old version, at the end of the day. And then they try to figure out, okay, what do we do now? Do we like merge our work together? So looking at technologies, and Perforce does a great job of this, for example, where you can have really easy ways for the whole team to know, okay, this character is being worked on by 2 people, or it's being worked on by 1 team. And they're going to commit to finishing the version up by the end of the day or the end of the week. So it becomes really easy to not kind of step over each other's toes, and really have that seamless workflow and content pipeline. So you're basically not duplicating work, and that's where the word locking comes in. So again, you kind of lock a character or lock a level or some kind of asset. That's the primary mechanism to have the team know that these things are being worked on, come back when they're quote unquote unlocked, and then it becomes really kind of that easy notifier to let people kind of continue progressing on a particular piece or a particular level. And branching comes from the Git world, which is how do you take the current version of a level? I'm going to create my own version, make a bunch of changes, and then bring those changes back into the project. That works sometimes. Branching came from the world of source code, where it was easier to do what I just mentioned. You can make a version of your own document, make some changes, and just kind of merge it with the document. In gaming, most of the stuff you're working on is not like that. It's art, it's binaries. It could be a level that's got thousands of different files. So you can't really bring all that back and just magically bring it together, because somebody may have changed the level completely and there's really no way to bring that back. So branching has a role to play for certain parts of the gaming stack, but more often than not, you're looking for locking. So if something gives you the ability to lock files or lock assets or levels or characters, that's going to be the predominant way to coordinate working cooperatively on something. So I think all the version control technologies today provide locking. Even Git has released some level of locking. So again, it's going to be kind of your preferred way to make sure that everybody is not stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah, just working on the art team in NVIDIA, like that was so incredibly valuable, just being able to, you might try to go in and take someone's thing and then you see it's locked and then you're like, well, I want to work on the thing. But you understand that it's like, if we were trying to change different aspects of the model or just how it functioned, it wouldn't work, right? Like that's just not how those assets are handled. But by them like checking them out, it's like, or by myself being able to check them out, and somebody tries to take the thing and like, I wanted to change it. I'm like, well, you can have it when I'm done taking care of it, and then you can go back and make your adjustments.
It's sharing as a kid. We learned it. It's fundamental.
But yeah, that was really crucial to making sure we just weren't stepping on each other's toes and utterly destroying these assets.
Yeah,
that happened to me in college.
And like I said, yeah, exactly. Again, look out for these things. I think there's that's from what we're seeing, studios do. I've seen them do branching or locking, but branching typically comes in when you're just literally forking something completely. Like I want to make a new version of a game or a new version of a level, and it may not be coming back to that original version. So there's reasons for that, and that's what you call branching. So you kind of fork things. But when you're actively working on, got 3 weeks till some big milestone, everybody's working, scrambling on different pieces, locking is going to be key. So the locking has to be easy to use. It's got to be really performant, and it just has to work. And like I said, the nice thing is that all the version control technologies today offer some level of locking, some better than others.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So then my, my favorite topic of project management, I mentioned it earlier. This is something that may not be as visible to the creative teams or the development teams, could be more at the production level, but more so than not, especially with the newer studios, because of the tools that are available now, and there's a flurry of them, people are moving away from using spreadsheets and kind of older school kind of project tracking technologies to tools that may have project management already built into the version control, or it could be a separate tool. Trello is a really popular kind of card wall tool. There's a couple others out there in the ecosystem, but the really good studios, even if they're small, manage backlogs, meaning every item across that entire pipeline is documented. You can kind of assign different pieces to it, and then if you're able to tie those pieces of work to even the code or the characters that are happening in the other tools, then it becomes really awesome, because you can kind of get the full picture of not only who's working on it, why we're working on it, what are the dates, but also where is the code, what's the status of it, how's it looking if I want to go check it out, etc. So tracking all the details matters. I think there's lots of tools out there to do this. You could even do this in a spreadsheet if you want to. I've seen some interesting templates in things like Google Sheets, but there are loads of tools out there where you can basically organize your entire game into these work buckets and prioritize them, give different columns and statuses. But it becomes really awesome because you can quickly see, are we behind, what's left to be done for the next milestone, the next demo. So again, I encourage everybody to at least look out for some of these tools. Like I said, Trello is a popular one. There's another tool called Handsoft, which is kind of a gaming specific tool. There's loads of other project management tools out there. But the key to me is when you could tie those to the code, it becomes even more effective because you got it all in kind of one easy to look at place.
Yeah, we used to look at using Gantt charts a lot for production flow and just making sure everyone was on the same page of where tasks are at and tracking time and doing all those kind of things. So I know there's a lot of tools for
doing things of time. It's not the most exciting, it's not as fun as building a level, but they are important, and there's always those folks on a team that are super responsible for it, and I think some of the feedback that they've seen or they get is that it doesn't need to be as complicated in all scenarios. So sometimes a Gantt chart is important, but sometimes you could probably get away with a card wall. Like we've got an example of a card wall here where you just want to track different buckets of work through the different stages, and akin to kind of a Trello card wall. And it's sometimes you get just enough project management that the team gets everything that they need, which is the time tracking, what's left to do, visibility. But then again, as you get into larger titles, larger teams, then you probably move into kind of more complex. Like I said, you may even get into a lot of Gantt charts, kind of tracking longer term projects.
Very cool.
And that's really, all I had for the presentation. I was going to kind of jump into a quick demo. I know for the folks that are looking at the jam coming up, it's going to be on Assembla. We've a Perforce solution there. So I was going to walk through just how easy it is to kind of navigate that, set it up with Epic's game engine. And even if you want to check it out beforehand, there's a 7-day free trial. You can just poke around if you want to get acclimated as well.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's we'll start getting requests for.
Already have.
Oh, have you? There you go. So people are getting on it.
Ready.
The MegaJam is right around the corner.
All
All right.
So we've got, do you guys see a dragon? There's a dragon on the screen.
Yeah.
There is a
Your
dragon.
video.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So,
He's a little slow. I'd say he's dragon.
could be the latency on the video with
Yeah.
the
I just needed to
feed.
get a pun in before the day was over.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well timed, well timed. So yeah, if you go to assembla.com/perforce, there's a really awesome dragon video. So I tend to just kind of watch that for a while. But this is where you want to engage. So there's a green button here where it says "Try now for free." So when you click on that, there's really something that pops up saying, "Hey, select which region you're going to want to start this account in." And so today we've actually got one in the United States. So if you're stateside, you're going to get super high performance in our Ohio AWS data center. But if you're overseas, maybe you're in Europe, Asia, et cetera, it may be better to set up in Frankfurt. I think for the jam itself, for folks that are joining in that one's hosted in our Ohio data center. I'm sure we'll be expanding that for future jams if we want to have multiple regions. But if you're just playing around, there's two choices. We're going to be adding more later. And when you click on this, you basically go through a very simple, put in your username, password, kind of the typical sign up now. And that's really it. Once you're in, and it takes maybe about 30 to 60 seconds, you get presented with a screen like this, which has a number of different things in it. But I'll kind of quickly summarize what's going on here. So on the top of the screen, you're going to have kind of the main navigation bar, which kind of tells you, okay, which project am I in? I made a project called UE4 Demo. There'll probably be one for the Jam folks, something about like the actual Jam. I think you guys have created some projects around that. And under that, you've got basically the ability to add what we call tools. So there's a big green button that says, you want to add team members, you want to add different kind of version control repos, add some new tickets. If you want to use the card wall, you can add some wiki pages if you're just kind of making notes, or make other projects. But for the sake of time, and specifically around the jam, if you are adding a Perforce repo and you're going to be using that, and I think that'll probably be already pre-installed, you click on it, it'll create the repo in about 30 seconds. And then you're presented with this kind of initial screen that kind of gives you all of the steps you need to connect to it. What you need, the client, and again, there's more documentation on our website about some of these details. So this just gives you kind of a quick little summary of where you need to go, what the URL is, what your P4 host is going to be, which is kind of a Perforce specific thing. And so when it comes time to actually go into the engine, here's the Unreal Engine. And you've got maybe your own project set up, or you're going to be starting a new one. Up there on the top is this thing called source control. And that's where you're going to be putting in, connect to source control, select Perforce or whichever one you're specifically choosing. And you're going to put in your different credentials that are on the previous screen. So, the URL, what's your username, the host, the password. And then when you connect to that, it will all kind of sync up, and there'll be kind of a green thing, a green status. And then really from that point, you do everything in the engine. So you can, right click on an asset, and there'll be some selectors that you can use for version control. Like, hey, I want to lock this BSP. I don't want anyone else to work on it, etc. So, or I want to make some changes. So everything at that point happens in the engine itself, and it's really smooth. You never really have to leave the engine. And Perforce does actually have included with Epic, you can integrate not only the Unreal Engine with tools like Maya or 3D Studio, but all those together can work with Perforce. So you're kind of always going to be working in your either art or your 3D workbench. And unless you specifically need to add new users or do something specific, you never really have to jump back out to Assembla. That really just, it was there to set up your actual version control service. And then from that point, you're just doing your familiar workflows in this engine. And that's really it. So like I said, you can get up and running in about 5 minutes, and it's pretty smooth.
Easy peasy.
That's right.
So we have some folks have some questions about that setup. They were wondering, does Assembla give super user level access to Perforce?
Great question. We get this quite a bit. So there's a couple of different flavors of Perforce services at Assembla. So the really quick, set it up through the web UI, kind of sign up now. You don't have super user access. You're basically doing all your user management through the UI, which is, invite your teams. Let me just pull that up here quick. There's this team page, and you've got all your team members, and you can add them and invite them and all that kind of stuff. So that is what I call kind of the real easy, simple mode. If you need super user access, we do have another type of Perforce service, which we call more dedicated or single tenant, where you're basically running on a more dedicated infrastructure. So we can set you up in any AWS region in the world. You get more powerful servers, more powerful capabilities. You can even host services like Helix Swarm, which is a code review tool that they built specifically for Perforce. And you can also then get super admin access. So if you want to manage Perforce through that interface, that's where that capability comes in. The kind of simpler, what I call on-demand service, for different reasons, we don't allow super admin access. So that would be the difference. So if you're going to be asking questions to Assembla, like, hey, can I get more information about that? Make sure to say, hey, I learned about this dedicated kind of single tenant infrastructure that Jacek was mentioning. I'd love to get more information about super admin specifically. And like I said, we can send some documentation out for sure.
Cool. Does Assembla allow arbitrary triggers on their Perforce repos, for example, like shell and bash scripts?
Yes. So we run all the servers on a Linux platform, so they have to be anything that can run on Linux. So we don't allow Windows type triggers. So if it's Bash or Linux, those are allowed. And like I said, when it comes to installing your own triggers, that's typically where it comes into that single tenant, more dedicated infrastructure where you can have really any triggers that you want installed. We can install them for you. Or if you've got super admin, you can go install those as well.
Okay.
I had a pun, but I'm not going to make it.
Okay.
It's hard. I'm trying.
They're wondering if the Perforce connections to Assembla use HTTPS, kind of going back to some of the security discussions.
Yeah, so the default mode is running over what's called SSL, which would be kind of the equivalent of HTTPS.
Okay.
So it is a secure connection, and it runs over a different port than the non-secure, and you could pick both, but the default is over TLS, or kind of the same as HTTPS.
And then if they have 50 people checking out a depot all at once on Assembla, will they see a bandwidth cap? They're wondering how much throughput is available.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of answers to that question. I think the easiest way to explain it would be for the smaller solution, it typically works well up to, we have some teams that are under 100 people, but over 50, but they don't have a lot of concurrent work happening. So you're not going to have 100 people checking out the code at once. So, or they may be really close to where the data center is. So they're very happy with the performance in that setup. But typically, studios opt to go with a dedicated infrastructure because it's not that much more really, but you're getting dedicated servers. We can size the entire solution to your needs. So that's where we work with you to say, what's your workflow going to look like? Are you guys all going to be checking out, once a day in the morning? Let's think about this, and we can kind of right size it. And then when it comes to the actual bandwidth, there's no bandwidth caps. It just comes down to figuring out how much bandwidth the team's going to consume, and if it's going to be a lot, then that's something that we have to look at when it comes to the pricing. The small solution doesn't have any bandwidth cap, nor does it have any bandwidth fees. It's just a simple $44.50 a user per month on an annual contract. But for the larger teams, which may be pulling down terabytes a day, that tends to be pretty pricey. AWS, for example, which is our preferred provider, they make their money on anything that's leaving AWS. So if you're pulling code out of AWS, so checking out, that's a cost. So again, and that's part of what we look at together with you to make sure that, like, hey, let's size this for your team. If it's going to be a lot of data, it's probably not going to be free. There'll be some amount that you'll have to pay. But again, like I said, that's the way it kind of changes when you're going from that simple on-demand service to more of a dedicated. So the simple one does not have any caps. So like I said, you can grab as much information as you can, but it's going to be limited by the amount of horsepower that those systems can handle, because we've got hundreds of clients in that infrastructure, and so can only do so much.
So that's a shared ecosystem for them?
It is.
Gotcha. Okay. But
Yeah,
then you have the
for
tiers
side.
where I can get my own VPS and have my own speed and bandwidth and pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got some studios that actually get deployed across multiple geographies. So they have, a master server on the West Coast.
Gotcha.
They might have studios in 5 different continents. We get all of that synced up together, so everybody in each continent is only talking to the local server, and then all the magic happens in the background, that the master server is always up to date.
So it's mirroring
and all of that is
all the time.
That's right.
Cool. That's awesome.
Then the sign up previously was assembla.com/perforce for that trial, right?
That's right. Exactly. Assembla.com/perforce. Basically the green button. And it's a 7-day free trial, and there's no, like I said, you can start with 1 user, so you don't have to commit to 10 users or 5, and you have 7 days to check it out. So if you want to check out the performance, you want to check out whether the US region is better than the European region, you can set up trials on both. Tie it to your engine, see how it's working, and then, like I said, if it doesn't work, let us know. I mean, it could be a couple of things. One, it could be just the bandwidth relative to where the server is. Maybe it is that you've got too many people trying to do too much at once, or some other factor. So, like I said, we're more than happy to help. There's a friendly blue button on the bottom right. You can basically talk to our support team right on the website or in the app itself. So if you're on the website, you can basically interact this way, or in the app, going back to Assembla, there's a blue button as well. You can just talk to our team there, and we'll have someone, take a look or help you out.
Awesome. Well, we've got a wrap up for today. Thank you so much for joining us and sponsoring the jams.
Yeah, we have quite an assembly for the jam.
Oh, jeez.
I'm not going to stop. Puns are so fun.
Assembly for the assembly, yeah.
Yeah. We're assembled
Awesome.
here today.
No, it's great that it's
excellent.
super easy for folks to get started and can really just dive in and hopefully save them potential headaches or disaster in the event that somebody bungles some code, or, you know, heaven forbid, the power go out and you lose hours of work. That's always a devastating moment. So thank you so much for joining us. As always, I've tossed a survey in our chat, in all the chats. So let us know how we're doing, what kinds of topics you'd like to see in the future, and start checking your area for local meetup groups. These, meetup.com/pro/Unreal Engine. Hopefully there are folks in your area meeting and talking cool game dev stuff, but if not, you can always start a group. Feel free to reach out to us. This month is your last chance to enter in the NVIDIA Edge program. We've had a really wonderful year of some
Been incredible.
fantastic projects. So if you're got an amazingly beautiful project to share with us, tag us, check out those rules, and maybe a 1080 Ti will be coming your way. I'll talk about the spotlight and the countdown.
The spotlight and the countdown. Absolutely, I would love to. I was like the spotlight. You do the spotlight. I do the. So every week, most weeks, when we don't run into technical issues, we start with a stream. We start the stream with a 5-minute countdown, which is a speed dev, and they're amazing to watch. It's so cool watching people like create awesome things, and so if you want to get involved in this, take like a 30-minute or hour-long development of Unreal Engine. What you're doing, if you're doing stuff in 3D Blender, Maya, whatever it is, that's fine too. But put this all together into like a 5-minute compression for us and send it over to community@unrealengine.com. What else do we need? We need a description of your game as well as a copy of your logo. And you might just see your project here on the weekly live streams. And if your project is already shown and you want to send us an updated one, that's great too. We love seeing the progress of things. So that's that. Follow us on social media.
Yeah,
There's all
those
that
things.
stuff. Yeah.
If you're streaming on Twitch, let us know. Do you want to talk about, are we?
Yeah, we're going to do that thing. So last week, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right? I think so. Last week, we hosted a really cool project that's been ongoing. Matt Workman does a great job, and we're gonna keep this going as long as we're having fun. Now, disclaimer: we are not responsible for the content of this stream. He is where we're going as a UE4 developer, but language, content, all at your own risk. I don't think there's anything.
So who is it?
Oh, it is Mabus Games.
All right.
Mabus Games. So we're gonna host him.
So stick around.
Right after, yeah, don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
We're going to say bye, and then you're going to disappear, and they're going to be sad. But then we're going to go over there and have fun with him.
Yep.
All right, guys.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jacek, for discussing all about source control with Assembla. And we'll see you all next week with some marketplace updates from our very own Josh Fleming. So
Stay tuned.
be there for that. We'll see you all next week.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.